So you've had exams last week, you have exams next week, and you've got a weekend in between. How are you going to spend your time wisely? Well, I'm going to break it down. In this video, I'm going to be taking you through the weekend exam revision strategy that I use throughout GCSEs, throughout A Levels, that works. And this isn't some insane 12 hours a day. We're only doing 6 hours a day, and we're going to break it down into 3 2-hour blocks. But what you do with those 2-hour blocks and how you assign them for the different exams that you have coming up next week is really important. So that's what I'm going to take you through. As ever, if you do have any questions, let me know in the comments. And if you want me to be focusing on any specific subjects over the next coming weeks or any specific questions that you have, do let me know. So like I've said, the overall structure that we're going to go for is 3 2-hour blocks with breaks in between, utilising different study techniques and focusing on different exams. So your brain isn't getting too overloaded by focusing on one thing for ages, and you're also switching up, making sure you're using the best possible revision strategies, a combination of interleaving, active recall, blurting, the Feynman technique. Okay. Saturday, Sunday, 6 hours each. The focus for Saturday is going to be to sharpen your weakest topics and to cover exam skills. So what I want you to do is block number 1. This is going to be your first set of 2 hours. I want you to look at the papers that you have coming up over the next week and pick your weakest paper. No matter whether it's the one on the Monday or the one on the Friday, you're going to start off with whatever you feel like you're weakest in. And what you're going to do for these 2 hours is you're going to be focusing on priority content review. So we're not going to be doing practice questions and we're not going to be doing past papers. You might be thinking that's not very effective, very close to exams, but if it is your weakest paper, you need to make sure you have content nailed, because that content clearly doesn't come naturally to you. It's not something you find easy. You've got to make sure that you've got the basic principles in your head. And the way that you're going to do that is you're going to get a trusted resource of textbooks and videos, your class notes, whatever that you have, and you're going to read through it for 5 minutes and blurt for 5 minutes. Read through some more for 5 minutes and blurt for 5 minutes. And then you're blurting relating to what you have just read. And that switch between reading and taking information in to straight away very actively trying to recall it, trying to put it down on a piece of paper, that is what's going to help you remember it. That's what's going to make it stick. You're going to do that for the first hour of your 2-hour block. And then once you've done that first hour and you've been, switching between reading and blurting, then I want you to move away and I want you to try and write your own questions related to that topic. I want you to, let's say you were looking at physics and you'd been doing a bit of blurting about, forces. You might be writing some questions about, explain the principle of the conservation of momentum. Explain and describe the different types of forces that exist. And you're going to answer them, and once you've answered them, you're going to go back to your source and you're going to check that you got it correct. This not only means that you've got the content reinforced, but it also means that you're immediately thinking about, okay, I've got the content, how is this actually going to be tested in the exam? How am I going to need to adapt the bare bones concept to answering a specifically structured exam question? And getting that done whilst writing your own questions not only really forces you to think about the content that you've learned, you're putting yourself in the seat of an examiner, but you're also getting a bit of exam style practice without using up past paper questions. For the second block on your Saturday, you're going to pick your first exam. If for some reason, your first exam had been the hardest one and you'd done it already for the first block, then pick your second exam. But generally, we're going to pick the first one and you're going to do a full timed past paper practice. Try and pick the most recent past paper if you've not done it already. If you have done all of the past papers, then either pick one that you've done ages ago that you're not going to remember, or pick one from another exam board, because sometimes that can be really useful in testing your adaptability. But generally, you'll probably have you'll have an exam paper or two that you can go to, that you can do for this 2 hours. Timed conditions, no notes, treat it as if you would in an exam. Make sure you're in an environment that is quiet, that is going to allow you to focus. You're going to do the whole exam. And then, of course, you're going to go to the mark scheme, you're going to mark it. You're also, at the same time as going through the mark scheme, going to have up the examiner's report, so you can compare and contrast what you got wrong with what examiners said a lot of students got wrong. And as you're going through, once you notice that you get something wrong, as ever, never let that be it. You don't go, oh, that question was wrong, okay. You don't even go, oh, that question was wrong, let me read through the right answer. Oh, okay, I probably would have put that and move on. If you're thinking, oh, I probably would have put that, you're almost definitely not going to have put that. So what I want you to do is I want you to really compare line by line what you put versus what the mark scheme says that you should have put, and think, okay, where was the gap in my knowledge? Why did I get this question wrong? Was it a gap in application? Was it a gap in knowledge? What was the actual cause? Okay, think about it, note it down on a little sheet beside you. You're going to be able to turn that into a cheat sheet later on, but then continue through, go through the rest of your paper, and then go back and redo every single one of the questions that you got wrong. If it was an essay, and it's a 25-mark essay, you don't redo the entire essay, that's going to take forever, but do redo it in bullet point format. Bullet point what you should be writing. The key things, basically redo your essay plan. With all of those little notes that you have on the mistakes that you made, if you have time in this 2-hour block, I do want you to very briefly write out, go back to a textbook or a video, some trusted source, and I want you to sort of write out correct answers. Like if, for example, you'd been getting things wrong in electricity, you weren't really understanding capacitors, whatever it is, write out a little explanation for how they actually work on your little cheat sheet, because then that is immediately going, okay, I got it wrong, this is how I'm going to correct it, and you have a little sheet that you can look at right before the exam with common mistakes that you've made. Now, block 3 on the Saturday, I want you to consider how many other papers do you have. So you will have covered 2 different papers so far. You'll likely have 3 or 4 more papers that you're going to be sitting the next week. And if that's the case, if you've got 3 more papers, I want you to be spending about 45 minutes on each one. And if you've got 4 more papers, I want you to be spending half an hour in each one. And this is just some practice questions. This is just you saying, okay, I have a chemistry paper coming up next week, and I'm going to do 30 minutes of a topic in chemistry. You might want to do 30 minutes of, I'm forgetting every single chemistry topic that I have ever studied in my life. But whatever it is, you're going to pick a question pack. You can look on platforms like Physics and Maths Tutor for these, there are plenty, and you're just going to do them, making sure, however, as you're going through practice questions, this is a mistake that a lot of students make. They give themselves unlimited time to do practice questions, which can be useful, but you're so close to the exams now, you should be timing yourself on practice questions as well. How do you do that? Stick with a mark a minute. If it's a 6-mark question, give yourself 6 minutes. 1-mark question, give yourself a minute. And go through, and obviously don't use up the entire 45 minutes or half an hour because you want to be going through and marking. However, that being said, what I would recommend for when you're doing this is not to try and go through everything and then mark everything, particularly if you're looking at question packs that are going to be on a similar topic or on the same topic. Then if you do all of the questions and then mark them all, you might find that actually you've made basically the same mistake in a lot of questions. Whereas if you answer one question, go mark it straight away, answer the next, mark that. If you make a mistake, you'll pick it up immediately, correct it, and then be able to apply the corrected version rather than reinforcing the incorrect version in your head as you go through the rest of the questions. So that was Saturday, time for Sunday. First block of 2 hours, you're not going to be focusing on a specific topic or a specific paper. What you're going to be doing instead is you're going to be thinking about the mistakes that you made on Saturday. Mistakes you made in the past paper. Topics that you didn't fully understand as you were blurting them out. Errors that you made whilst doing practice questions during your 3rd block of studying. Think about all of them, and I want you to just be testing yourself and reinforcing the correct version of all of these things. Now, a lot of people say don't use a lot of different, subjects and topics in one revision session. However, when you're just trying to go through and review mistakes, it can be very useful to revise them all in one go, simply because you're sort of making that association between this is the time at which I review the things that I get wrong. And you're more likely to then actually be able to remember the fact that those are things that you got wrong if you've done all of those incorrect beliefs, all of those mistakes that you made in one session. So that is how you're going to spend the first hour, 2 hours, I mean. And of course, this should not be passive. This should not just be reading or watching videos. This should be trying to use the Feynman technique, or this should be writing little question banks, or even creating little cheat sheets of your mistakes that you can look at in future. In block 2, we are going to be looking at past papers again. However, we are not going to be going through them in exam-timed conditions. Instead, what you're going to do, particularly if you have essay-based subjects coming up over the next week, I know that English literature is next week, and so is English language. So if you are sitting GCSEs and those are the 2 subjects that are coming up next week, I want you to be focusing on those 2 during these 2 hours. For the first hour, you're going to focus on one, and for the second hour, you're going to focus on the other. You're going to get up some past papers, and you're going to write skeleton essays in response. So you're not going to be writing full 45-minute essays. You're going to be writing 10, 15-minute skeleton essays. What do I mean by that? I want you to write a full introduction, and I want you to write a full conclusion. But for the body of that essay, I just want you to write the point. Write the first sentence of each paragraph, insert whatever quotation you want to talk about, or insert, something that is relevant. So for English language, I will come to that in just a moment. And then also bullet point pieces of analysis, bullet point piece of context, and write little conclusions to the paragraph. And that should take you 15-ish minutes. And so you'll be able to get through quite a few essays in 1 hour. For English language, a lot of people are like, I have no idea how to revise this. And I'll have a more comprehensive video that focuses purely on English language coming out very soon. But in terms of what you want to be doing this weekend, if you have got past papers still, please be using them. Please, please, please use every single past paper that there is. You can look at the previous specifications because for English language it's essentially the same. And if you've run out of past papers, basically set your own. Get a book, take the first 3 pages of that book, or flick to a random chapter and take the first 3 pages of that chapter of that book, and write yourself questions, because English language follows the exact same set of questions, no matter what the paper is, no matter what the context is. It's the same set of questions. It's just ever so slightly changed, but particularly for question 2, question 3, very easy for you to write yourself. You might think for sort of question 4, that's quite hard for you to write, but actually, if you can be writing your own question 4 questions for texts that you found yourself, you fundamentally understand what it is asking you to do. And if you fundamentally understand what it's asking you to do, then you're going to be able to answer it in the way that is going to get you top grades. So that is how you're going to spend your 2 hours on your Sunday. For the final block on Sunday, I would like you to be spending time thinking about your first 2 exams. And I want you to split, again, the 2 hours, so an hour on your first exam, an hour on your second exam, and you want to be just blitzing through content. You want to be blitzing through flashcards. If you have pre-made flashcards, that is wonderful. If you do not, Quizlet has so many. You can just find pre-made sets on there. I want you to just go through and test concepts. If you have Seneca as well, that works very, very similarly. If you have absolutely none of those, then what I want you to do is basically be questioning yourself. So just sit there, have the specification up, and you'll be reading through, and the first point might be something like, I don't know, the student needs to understand covalent bonding. Okay, ask yourself, what is covalent bonding? Answer it. Have a look in your textbook. Did you get it correct? Perfect, move on. Do it for the next team. The student needs to know about ionic bonding. What is ionic bonding? Respond. And that sort of way. So those are my tips for making sure that you are utilising your time this weekend as effectively as possible to make sure that you are going to ace your exams coming up next week. As ever, I'll see you in the next video, and if you really want more tips, then you can see my Instagram here and my TikTok over here as well.